Pinchas Nachmani was a navigator in the Israeli Air Force during the Yom Kippur War. And in 1973, he was shot down and captured by the Syrians. Nachmani was held for 3 years in prison and subjected to horrible torture and interrogation. And when he was finally released, Nachmani was asked, "Do you hate the Syrians?" And he answered, "No, I don't hate them. Hatred is a weapon of the weak." Few people have the strength of character of Mr. Nachmani. We hate others for a variety of reasons, small and large. Sometimes we hate others for no reason at all, yet hatred, as Pinchas said, is the weapon of the weak. When we succumb to hate, we reveal our true weaknesses as human beings. Our Torah portion this morning is the story of an age-old conflict between two brothers, between two nations. Even before they were born, Jacob and Esau were fighting in their mother's womb. As young men, they were different in character, different in temperament. And as they approached adulthood, they competed for the birthright and their father's blessing. Esau had every reason to hate his younger brother. Jacob took advantage of Esau's appetites, and the younger brother shrewdly robbed him of his blessing by tricking their father. But no love was lost between Jacob and Esau either. Jacob must have seen Esau as a gruff and ignorant man who was more interested in hunting and the outdoors than seeking God. In his mind, Esau did not deserve their father's blessing. He was more than glad to go along with his mother's ruse. For the sages, the brotherly conflict was an eternal one, passed on from generation to generation. For our rabbis, Esau and Jacob symbolized two nations, Edom and Yisrael. They were two great civilizations, Rome and Jerusalem. And ultimately, they were founders of two mighty religions, Christianity and Judaism. As an oppressed people, the Jewish people saw Esau as the source of their suffering. Rashi writes that as a result of this, the two brothers, both really two nations, could not coexist. Rashi comments, they were already separated, one to his wickedness and the other to righteousness. Rashi continues, they shall not be equal in greatness. When one rises in greatness, the other shall fall. These brothers and people seemingly cannot coexist. The break between Jacob and Esau is made most clear in the book of prophets, specifically Malachi, where the Haftarah comes from, where it's written, declares God, Esau is Jacob's brother. I have accepted Jacob and rejected Esau. A more pointed and literal translation might have God saying to Malachi, I hate Esau. It's ironic that the latter interpretation of the story, both from the prophet Malachi and from the rabbis, seems to run counter to the pshat, the plain meaning of the biblical narrative. The Torah sees Esau as the victim and Jacob as the perpetrator. Malachi and the sages, on the other hand, depict Esau as wicked and murderous, and Jacob as righteous and innocent. Maybe it has to do with the times in which these texts were written. Malachi was written after the destruction of the first temple, and the sages lived at a time when they were also powerless. For the rabbis, Rome had decimated Judea. Christianity then rose as a force that persecuted the Jewish people. And the only way that the rabbis could respond to Esau was by hating him and demonizing his descendants. So we are troubled whichever way we read the story of Jacob and Esau. The plain biblical narrative depicts Jacob, one of our patriarchs, as a con man. The later sages, though, depict Jacob as a righteous man who had every right to steal his evil brother's blessing. Jacob and Esau become a story of brotherly deception, hate, and in the end, reconciliation. I've been thinking a lot about how easy it is to hate. I've been reflecting on how hate makes us see the world in a very narrow way. When we hate, we see everything as reinforcing our myopic disposition. And so when my colleague Mark Greenspan shared with me the story and some reflections on Pinchas Nachmani, it resonated with me. Nachmani, the navigator shot down over 50 years ago, said, "Hatred is the weapon of the weak." Hate is an insidious emotion. It is corrosive to the soul. Hate is not constructive. Hate is an unbridled emotion. Thus, it is the weapon of the weak. In the context of the Middle East, it is hard not to hate. It's hard not to demonize Israel's neighbors just as they have demonized us. It is hard to find a reason not to hate Hamas. They are still holding 3 hostages from October 7th. And we know they are not alive, but this is day 778. And we wait for the return to give them a dignified burial. But for some time, it is too easy to see every Muslim as a terrorist or someone who sympathizes with terrorism, no matter where they live. And we hear the accusations against Jews around the world of committing and supporting genocide. Just this week, protesters gathered outside a synagogue in New York City chanting "Death to the IDF." Also this week, at Union Station, just downtown, our train station, the Times of Israel reported protesters wearing the masks of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, U.S. President Donald Trump, former U.S. President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Mark Rubio, and former Secretary of State Anthony Blinken were seen in videos of the display drinking mock blood from wine glasses at a table adorned with the blue stars of David, red drops splattering on the stars. The video is captured, the report says, is captioned, "Israeli Friendsgiving." The article describes in far more detail, but the staged drama reinforces the anti-Semitic trope of blood libel, of Jews killing others for their blood. This is 2025. In the heart of Washington, D.C., the blood libel hatred continues. Not in the far reaches of history, but in the heart of our capital, in the heart of our city. Israel is not weak, and we must make sure that it does not act out of hatred, though. It must balance the continued defense against Hamas with the humanitarian needs of Gaza. Israel must stop settler violence in the West Bank and be vigilant against true threats. Israel cannot afford to succumb to hatred, even if they have reason to do so. Too many Israeli politicians are stoking the flames of hatred, Ben-Gvir and others. The possibility of succumbing to hate is real in Israel and here in America. Israel has given the Palestinians reason to hate, and the Palestinians have given Israelis plenty of reasons to hate. And yet, we must continue to search for true and stable and empowered partners for peace, not out of hate or fear, but out of our own practical considerations. Israel must act from a place of strength and ensuring its security, and we must make sure hate has no place in that calculation. I read an op-ed by Pam Alcala this week in which she said, at a time when educators and organizations globally are working tirelessly to address the human aftermath of October 7th and combat a relentless surge of anti-Semitism, the Israeli government must be unwavering, a moral voice for its people. This demands a narrative that is both steeped in nuance, promoting healing and resilience, and entirely devoid of generalizations and hate, she wrote. The choice before us, therefore, is not merely political, it is spiritual, and fundamentally, it is about our survival. She continues, the Jewish future cannot be built on the scorched earth of xenophobia or the brittle foundation of zero-sum us or them philosophy. We must claim the depth of our ancient tradition, which mandates justice and compassion for all, echoing the warnings that the preservation of a single life is akin to saving an entire world. This demands every public utterance from our leaders be filtered through the lens of accountability, that hateful narratives are unequivocally rejected, and that the profound nuance of our existence as a people, anchored in history and yet responsible for the present, be upheld. To ensure the enduring safety and ethical strength of the Jewish people, we must choose language that heals rather than inflames, and leadership that unites rather than divides, forging a path forward rooted in the moral clarity that true security requires. As Jews in America, we must learn from this warning as we revisit our feelings about Israel's neighbors and also our Muslim neighbors here. Are we asserting a position of caution about security, or are our opinions tainted by hate? How do we want Jews and Muslims to interact in America? How much of the talk around Mayor-elect Mamdani was fact, that he would not speak against his use of the phrase globalize the intifada? And how much was false rhetoric to inflame fear, like all food in New York City had to be halal now? How do we want Jews and Muslims to interact as neighbors here in Montgomery County? Each one of us must search our own feelings, but we cannot afford to succumb to hate because it only weakens us. Hate weakens us as Americans, and hate weakens us as the Jewish people. After all, hatred is the weapon of the weak. This upcoming Monday night, we will gather with friends at Bethesda United Methodist Church directly across the street, and we've held this interfaith Thanksgiving service for over 60 years together. This year we'll be joined by St. Mark Presbyterian Church, the Rumi Forum, the Islamic Center, the Islamic Community Center of Potomac for the first time. Imam Rafai Arifin and I know each other as we've worked together at Whitman High School, where we brought together the Jewish Student Union and the Muslim Student Association over the past years. So please join us Monday night at 7:30. Bethesda United Methodist Church will host us this year. We'll be across the street. So do we hate Esau? Or do we see him as being taken advantage of by his brother Jacob? Do we adopt the mindset of the rabbis who themselves felt unempowered in the world and therefore held up Esau in effigy as a symbol of all the evil in the world? Do we see ourselves in the world as weak and rely on hatred of others as a weapon? Or do we appreciate how secure we are in the world and remain vigilant to maintain that? I believe we must remain alert to the challenges that the Jewish people face today. They are real and dangerous. And we must realize that by doing so, we can lift others up alongside us. The security of Israel and Jewish people is not a zero-sum game. Our security does not have to come at the expense of another's. But we have not yet met enough others who believe that. I'm not sure that even many Jews believe that. With real partners, we all could gain. There's too much hate against us, and it continues as a thin veil of being against Israel. I have hope that one day Israel and its neighbors will be at peace, though I doubt it will be in the near future. The Palestinians and Israelis, the region, deserves peace. In the Torah, Jacob and Esau eventually do reconcile. As Jacob is on the way to meet his brother, he lays down to sleep and wrestles with the angel. Maybe the wrestling was his internal struggle with his mixed emotions of overcoming hate and fear and guilt he had for his brother. He wakes up, he calls that place Bethel, our namesake. We know it is on this journey of reconciliation, though, that Jacob acquires the proud name Yisrael. We must also always be open to the journey of reconciliation. This will require us, like Jacob, to wrestle with our own issues. But hatred is a weapon of the weak. Pinchas Nachmani was able to overcome his hatred of the Syrian captors. Jacob is able to overcome his hatred of his brother Esau. And I pray that we too will be able eventually to overcome the conflicts and hatreds that exist in our lives and around us, so that we can see ourselves with strength and pride and truly call ourselves Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom.